Welcome to the Social Mission Revolution. Each week we explore some of the greatest undertold stories of businesses and everyday people who are making their ultimate impact on the world through social mission. This is Social Mission Revolution, and this is your host, Andrea Putting. Welcome to the Social Mission Revolution, and my guest here today is Karen Porter, and she is the founder of Underground Communications, which is a B Corp certified communications agency that helps companies increase their impactful success by building community around their brand, and also the founder of the Benefit Consultations, helping purpose-led organisations navigate the B Corp certification process and embed more impact into organisation. From a community's perspective, she is a New South Wales ambassador for non-profit White Lion, and she also holds the event chair for Be Local Sydney. So we're going to have a lot to talk to Karen about today. So I'm looking forward to exploring all of these things that Karen is involved in. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask you that difficult question, or easy question, might be easy for you. What is the one thing, if there was just one thing for you to fight for, what would that be?
So strap yourself in, because it's probably going to be a roundabout way to get there. So
Okay.
My core driver is community. It's at the heart of everything that I do. But without equity, you can't have community. Without including everybody, you can't have community. So I guess the one thing that I would and do fight for is what we like to call in the B Corp community, because somebody out there obviously has a sense of humour and is a Star Wars fan, Jedi, which is justice, equity, diversity and inclusion. So if there was one thing to fight for, it would be that, predominantly in a work environment, obviously because I work with organisations, but also in the school environment and the wider community. So that would be my one thing to fight for.
That's wonderful. That's very close to my heart. Community is very much at the heart and soul of everything that I do as well. And that equality, that sense of what I call the worth of all persons, is just where I live. So we're very much aligned in what drives both of us.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, it's the one thing that we need to change everything. Obviously we're in a climate crisis at the moment, but one of the difficulties that we'll have in solving that is that we live in a world where it's all about me.
Yes.
And we don't really live and work in community anymore. And when you're living and working in community, it helps to drive people towards something more meaningful together, and then things happen. So I think, it's at the basis of my theory of change, basically, is that, if we want to change the future, then we first all have to be working together, and not necessarily on the same things, but certainly working together to solve the issues that come up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's like you're saying exactly my stuff here. So yeah, that importance of people feeling accepted, having a sense of belonging, and then the opportunity to contribute once they're in that community and in a community and feel like that's where they feel like they've got something of value to give to the world.
Yeah.
And then they have that safe place where they can go into the world to contribute from, whether that's with other people or just with other people supporting them emotionally. That makes such a big difference.
Yeah. And the other thing that it does is it brings in a wider variety of lived experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to see problems from different angles and
Absolutely.
solutions from different angles as well. So, you know, and it also provides guidance to people. So where we are currently is, you know, we reach out to that internet and find the information that we think is what we need. But when you live and work in community, you have elders in our Indigenous community. The perfect example of this is that you have the people who have the lived experience to guide those who are coming along afterwards, and you get then that shared knowledge rather than picking and choosing things that you think might be the answer.
Yes. Yeah. It's a powerful community is a powerful thing. So I'd love you to share with us a little bit about what is it that you do in the world?
So a few things, obviously. So my primary business is underground communications, which I started back in 2012, many years before people understood what the word purpose meant in business. So at that time, I would talk about purpose to people and their eyes would glaze over.
Uh-huh.
But obviously these days it's different scenario. We've come on in leaps and bounds since then. But what we are is a communications agency, and my original intention, and this is all based around my theory of change, is to help companies not just recognize, but actually incorporate the fact that people are not just a work resource, and that they are part of a wider community, and that companies actually need to work with their wider stakeholder groups in order to effect change and actually be successful. So we primarily create stakeholder-led communication strategies that start from the inside out. Because if you want your company to be successful, and we do work with purpose-led organisations, so we're kind of starting from a point of companies that want to do good in the world anyway. But if you want your company to be successful, then having your team engaged with your values and your mission fully just has so many benefits. And a lot of companies, when they think about communications, they start at the wrong end. So they starting with that, hey, this is what we do to the outside world, when what they need to be doing is starting with their internal stakeholders first, making sure that everybody's aligned with where they're headed, what their mission is, what their values are. And then you end up with a whole army of ambassadors of your message. And it makes everything else, it's a bit like a domino effect, everything then falls into place, that your internal and your external messaging is aligned. So everything is with that word authentic that everybody loves to throw around, but your messaging then becomes authentic because your internal people are living and breathing those messages as well as what you're sharing with the world. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, what we do is we help companies communicate from the inside out.
And then they become an authentic influence in the world, which is my stuff. How do you become an authentic influence in the world? Well, that's certainly a main starting point, because I've known companies who have said, well, these are our values, and they put them out into the world but they forget to live them within their business.
Yeah.
Like you can't put out the word saying that our values are integrity if you're not living and breathing that every day in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the other part of my business, which is relatively new, so I launched this February this year. I did one iteration of it last year, but relaunched again in February this year, which is the benefit consultants. And so that business is designed to help companies navigate the B Corp certification process, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment.
Yes.
So that, it's a rigorous process, it's time consuming and it's challenging, as it should be, because it's to recognize the good that you do in the world. So it's to help companies navigate that process, but then take it a step further and move it away from being a box ticking exercise. It's like,
Yes.
Do we do all of these things to make this certification? And rather, again, it comes back to, and this is where the two organisations are aligned, it comes back to that stakeholder engagement of engaging your team around, this is what we're doing now. What could we be doing better? So the B Corp certification process, it starts with an online assessment, and that assessment creates a really good framework for assessing from the beginning, before you're even certified, what you're doing well and where you could actually be doing better, because it actually gives you, through the questions it asks, it makes you think, oh, potentially we could be doing more in this particular area. So yeah, that's the sort of two sides of the coin that that we're working on. Yeah.
So I have looked through the B Corp certification process, and it is lengthy and it is a lot of work, and I can see how important it is to have someone guide you through that, because you look at that and all the different areas that people don't consider. They think, oh yes, we're a green company, or we're a whatever. They think that they're doing things on a great level, on a good level. But then you stop and look at the B Corp stuff, and you are just blown away with how much more you can do.
Yeah.
So if you can just tell us a little bit about what the B Corp means, what it means to be certified with a B Corp, and what the value of that is, because in case people don't know.
So a little bit of background. I believe the movement started just prior to the global financial crisis back in the US. So it was started in the US, and it is a certification process that assesses how well and how ethically companies run, and it's across 5 different areas, 5 pillars. So it looks at your governance, workers, community, environment, and customers. And so you answer questions in each of those different pillars. And then you actually have to provide documentary evidence that what you say you do, you actually do. And so the beauty of the certification, and we've had B Corps in Australia since 2013, is that it's not only open to large organisations, and it's not like, a lot of people have this perception that it's an environmental certification, which it's not. So it's about social and environmental governance, basically, which means that, companies, so for example, we're a small service-based consultancy, so we don't make anything. We have a relatively small impact on the environment, but that doesn't mean that we don't care about the environment. It's just not our strongest pillar. So because you have the different pillars, where you can excel, you have to become certified, you have to achieve more than 80 points out of 200. And
that shows how hard it is in the first place, is that
yeah,
there's 200
right.
points and they're saying you only need to get 80. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of options there to keep growing as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the average for a non-purpose-led organisation is around the 40 to 50. And this is what I'm seeing with companies that are purpose-led when they first start on the journey. So it starts with an online assessment, so it's a self-assessment. And then once you submit that, that goes through to a standards analyst who then actually reviews the whole assessment along with your documentary evidence and interviews, etc. But so what I'm seeing is that purpose-led organisations, when they first start the process, kind of hit about 60 points. And then, you've got that's where that 20-point gap provides the opportunity for improvement. And that's really what this process is all about. It's not necessarily saying, okay, tick, we've got the B Corp certification. It's about getting companies to improve their practices across all of those areas. So, and once you do certify, it's a little bit addictive, because once you become part of the community, it's like, right, what can we change now? How can we do better?
How can we get up to that 200 points?
Yeah,
There's always
exactly.
somewhere further to go.
That's exactly right. Like, nobody has actually reached there yet, but be interested to see what happens when they do.
Yes. But then as a consumer, when you see that a company, that a business has a B Corp certification, you know that they become your business of choice to do business with, or to be employed with, because you know that they've got ethical standards that you're going to be proud to be involved in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, more and more surveys and research is showing that people want to buy from companies that are making the effort to do better with their business practices, taking the ethical approach, both from a social and environmental position. So, and especially good that you highlighted that worker aspect, because by 2025, 75% of the workforce will be millennials. And they are really driven by wanting to work for somewhere that actually enables them to have meaning to their days. So they don't just want to show up and do a job, make a widget. They actually want to feel like they are contributing. And that doesn't necessarily mean, you have to have a higher purpose, or, what's perceived to be the disruptors and the innovators who are sort of finding ways to reduce famine. Doesn't necessarily have to be something around those lines. It can be as simple as the work that you do contributes a need in a community.
Yes.
So, for example, there was a company in the US, DTE Energy, who just before the GFC hit, their new CEO had a lot of issues within the team, a lot of presenteeism, that's people showing up but not really showing up.
Yeah.
And he was advised to identify what their purpose was and share that with the team. He was a little bit skeptical, but what he did was he had a video created. So these guys were an energy producer, had a video created that demonstrated all of the contributions from each one of the different team members or the different departments, how that contributed to supporting their community and the difference it made within the company.
Difference.
100%. So all of his troubles with the team stopped, and they became the most profitable under his lead.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's so important to have that understanding of
Mm.
what you're really doing, the lives that you're touching.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we run out of time, we haven't even mentioned, what kind of social mission do you have in your life?
So my social mission comes back to that theory of change, and it is 100% around community and really helping companies to shift how they operate from a people perspective. And that's not just internally, but all of their stakeholders, and building that community around a brand so that they're actually, we're all then, you've got your little satellites who all then come together to create that change in the world. So for me, it's about creating community to solve the world's problems.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you, well, in your introduction, you do work with White Lion. What is White Lion?
So White Lion is a non-profit that works with at-risk young people, and it helps them, I've got to remember
The official line?
The official line, yes. So it helps them create meaningful connections and pathways to work. So the organisation started over 20 years ago out of their co-founders. He worked in the justice system, and he could see these young people were on a revolving door of going through the justice system, coming out and coming back in again. And so he created White Lion to help break that chain. And the organisation's evolved over the years. They have a new CEO who's been in the job for a couple of years, and she's really identified a clear pathway to help these young people. And the reason it resonated so much with me is because it absolutely comes back down to that community aspect. And the young people are our community leaders of the future. Because we have that, that lack of community now, these young people don't have those mentors and leaders to guide them into an adulthood of meaning. So that's White Lion's role. So I've been involved in them for probably about 6 years now. And I work with they're actually a Melbourne-based organisation, but they have a New South Wales, they've got a social enterprise cafe in Mount Druitt, which is Sydney's west, which is coming up for its 5th year. Apparently there are a few other social enterprises in this cafe that failed, and here we are. This is in their 5th year, so they're going strong. So I work with the local team.
That sounds amazing. I really think it's just so important to working with young people. So many young people don't have those mentors and role models these days that we may have had, well, when I was young.
Yep, definitely.
Because our society is very different now, and with people being so busy with work life and etc.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've really lost that extended family network.
Yeah.
I sit here as the world's greatest irony, actually. So I grew up in the north of England with my dad was one of 7, with a very close-knit extended family. And I am now in Australia completely alone.
It makes you, you appreciate what that really means in this world. And I was having this conversation with someone yesterday about the difference between community and tribal, and I think often in these situations that we live in now, because we don't have that greater community feeling all the time, people do kind of congregate in tribes. And especially with young people, you really don't want them thinking tribal, because then there's good elements about it, but it's also very exclusive.
Yeah.
You don't, it's just those few people.
Yeah, that's an
involved.
interesting concept. I haven't actually looked into that.
Yeah, it's something I'll dive deeper into in the next week, I think. Watch out for the next article on tribal versus community. So how do you find is difference in business having this kind of drive, this kind of purpose in the
Hmm.
background? What do you think it makes a difference in business into day-to-day living?
Um, I think um, it certainly gives more meaning to when you get up in the morning and you know that, you know, you're not just showing up to do a job, you're actually showing up to, and in my case, it's to help other people. It's almost to guide other people in them having a more meaningful outcome in the world. So it's certainly a sense of satisfaction. And for me personally, it's a driver. I don't think I could do anything that didn't involve purpose. And I think we've seen a shift certainly in the last probably 2 to 3 years. I mean, the pandemic has changed so much because it has highlighted so much inequity within, how people have been affected by it. But even before the pandemic, the shift was already starting to happen of larger companies actually starting to take notice of what this purpose thing is. And I think it seems like it's something new, but it really isn't. Because, and I'm going to take it back to one of my I bring this up all the time. So back in 1970, Milton Friedman made probably what I would suggest is a world-changing speech, and not necessarily in a good way, where he laid down the theory of shareholder primacy. And what's actually happened since then is that has driven us into a way where people have become a resource, if you like. So on one side of the ledger, they're a resource or a cost, and on the other side, they're a consumer. And so we've removed the humanity from it.
Yeah.
And I think prior to then, when you went into business, it was for a purpose. And it doesn't, we're not necessarily talking higher purpose, but there was always a reason you were solving a problem or a need. Whereas, that shifted everything into, well, we've got to make money. So I think really, if you take it back to basics, we should all be running businesses that have a purpose. But I think we now need that added social purpose, which is, bringing it back to community, is that how are we as organizations and people contributing? And when you contribute, you actually gain more. So,
Yeah. And people go home feeling empowered. They go home feeling energized rather than drained. It's just such a difference. I know, looking at my own experience of times when I've worked, when I felt really, really drained, compared to other times when I come home and I'm excited about my day's work.
Yeah.
We need to tap into that excitement about what we're doing.
That's right. And the flow-on effect from that is that when you're going home energized, you take that back into the family.
Yes.
And the opposite is also true. And so, this is why treating people well at work is so important for society as a whole, because the flow-on effects are, we either have high divorce rates, we have domestic violence, we have alcoholism.
That's right.
Or we have the family unit happily working together, and changes in the workplace where now we are seeing this much more lately, where, you know, companies are starting to recognize that fathers are parents too. So, you know, allowing them to have the same parental leave as mothers is so beneficial to the families.
Yeah.
So there's so much flow on from having a purposeful way of running your business.
Yeah. And people go home and whatever they experience at the workplace, they bring home. So if they're not happy in the workplace, they bring that home. They're not giving their children the emotional nourishment they need. And how does that affect the children? They don't have time, energy for community. How does that affect community? And it just on and on and on. And it's just such an important thing for us to be focused on and developing in business and community.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, running out of time, Karen. We could talk forever, I think. I think you and I are very much, you're saying all the things that I say. So I'm really loving talking to you. How can people get in touch with you if they want to know more about what you do and how you might be able to assist them?
Well, they can always drop me an email at karen@undergroundcomms.com.au, and that's double M for Mary with an S. So I lament that I created something I have to spell.
Good on you.
or the easiest way is probably just to connect with me on LinkedIn. And easiest way to find me, I think my LinkedIn handle is Karen Porter Oz, AUS. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. It's definitely the easiest way.
Yeah, I'll put all the links in the notes for the podcast.
Okay.
But I didn't very quickly. Do you have any piece of advice that you can just pass on to people about all that we've talked about today?
Yeah, one of the things that I find, and I find this particularly in the B Corp community, when I first joined, I thought, oh, I don't belong here, you know, all these great companies. But if we all have the attitude where I'm not big enough to do anything, then nothing happens and nothing changes. So I think the best piece of advice is that you don't have to have all the answers to solve any problems. You just need to start somewhere. So if there's something that you really believe in, then look for ways that you can actually start to make a change. There's a quote, and it's originally brought to me by Vincent Stanley, who's from Patagonia, who's my favorite B Corp in the world, which is, he always says perfect is the enemy of good, which my understanding is actually a Voltaire quote. But it so epitomizes the problems that people have in actually getting started, because you think you have to be that perfect person. You know, you have to do everything environmentally friendly. You know, you have to give to charity. You have to do all certain things to make a difference, and that's not the case at all. We all just need to do a little bit, and when we all do a little bit, a lot happens. So yeah, so basically it's start where you are.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So thank you so much for coming on to Social Mission Revolution today, Karen. It's been a real joy having you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I had really enjoyed our chat.
Thank you. And that's all we have today for the Social Mission Revolution, and I'll be back next time with the Social Mission Revolutionist. This has been the Social Mission Revolution with Andrea Putting. Join me again next week when we'll speak to another social mission revolutionist who will inspire you on your journey to making your ultimate impact on the world.